had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan for 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. So what I want you to see here is Abraham was disobedient to God's plan, and it's going to lead to family dysfunction. And everyone in this room can admit that their family is a little dysfunctional. Like there is dysfunction somewhere in your family. Somewhere in your family. Maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's a brother, sister, cousin. I don't know who it is, stepfather, stepmother. Someone in your family is dysfunctional because we're human. And so this dysfunction, this disobedience from Abraham causes dysfunction because Sarah starts to deal with Hagar harshly. She starts to hate her because she has this other kid, Ishmael, and it's not her kid really, but she thought it would be her kid. So she starts to hate Ishmael and she starts to hate Hagar. But it's still Abraham's son. And then Sarah conceives and has Isaac. And so Isaac and Ishmael from birth already had this view that they were at odds with each other because they're from two different women. And a lot of times in our life, that's what happens is we come from a broken family and we have step siblings or we have other siblings that we don't really care for or like. And from birth or from the moment you meet them, you already resent them and hate them. And so because of Abraham's disobedience, it leads to this dysfunction between Ishmael and Isaac. And so Isaac grows up not knowing how a family is really supposed to be structured. He grows up thinking that he's supposed to hate his sibling, and they're already at odds, and it creates this perverted view of what family is and how family is supposed to be. And so then Isaac grows up and gets married, and it's going to start this generational chain of dysfunction. And so since Isaac doesn't have a proper view of what family should look like, he grows up and marries Rebekah. And then it leads to my second point. Dysfunction leads to division. And so since Isaac grows up with this dysfunction, he gets married to Rebekah and never deals with the dysfunction. And then what ends up happening is Isaac and Rebekah have two kids. They have Jacob and Esau. And guess what? Isaac's favorite is Esau and Rebekah's favorite is Jacob. And so from the same way Ishmael and Isaac grew up hating each other, Esau and Jacob are going to grow up hating each other. And it starts this generational resentment in the family. It causes dysfunction in the family, and dysfunction leads to division. So automatically Esau and Jacob feel as if they are at odds. They already hate each other. And so now we're going to skip over. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 25. Just flip over in your Bible, Genesis chapter 25. And, I went one page too far. And this is what it says. In verse 27, Genesis 25, verses 27. It says, "The boys grew up," this is Esau and Jacob, "and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tenants. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob." Could you imagine growing up in a family where the mom and dad automatically and openly told you they had favorites? Talk about a dysfunctional family. I mean, right here in the text, it says Isaac loved Esau and Rebekah loved Jacob. And so automatically the siblings were at odds. And then so what ends up happening? What does this cause? It causes division. So then it causes division between Rebekah and Isaac. They're at odds. God never wants a marriage to be at odds. He wants you to be unified. But the devil knows that if he can divide the family, he can break the family. And so what ends up happening is God uses Rebekah to plot Jacob or Israel against his brother. So this is what it says in Genesis chapter 26, starting in verse 5. It says, "Now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to his son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, 'Look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, bring me some game and prepare me some tasty food to eat, so I may give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now my son, listen carefully and do what I tell you. Go out to the flock, Bring me two choice young goats, so I can prepare some tasty food for your father, the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so he may give you his blessing before he dies. All right, I'm going to summarize this story super quickly. What ends up happening is Isaac grows old, he's getting ready to die, and what tends to happen is he gives his blessing to the oldest son. That would be Esau. And so Isaac tells Esau, man, go hunt, kill me something, and make me some good stew. I want some good deer stew. That's what I want. And so Esau leaves, and Rebekah overhears this conversation, and she goes, Jacob, we're finna trick your father. This is what I want you to do. I want you to go get me 2 goats, and I'm going to cook him a stew, and then you're going to go in there and steal your brother's blessing. And Jacob ends up doing this because he wants to steal his brother Esau's blessing. And so what started with Abraham as disobedience led to dysfunction in the family. Then the dysfunction led to division, and so now this family is going to be divided between the 2 siblings because Jacob is stealing from Esau. And so he ends up doing it, and he steals his brother's blessing. And so Jacob steals Esau's blessing and then runs. He runs. And so when you don't deal with dysfunction and you run from it, you will end up running into what you were trying to avoid. This is what happens. Next point. The division leads to deception. And so Jacob deceives his brother. Jacob literally means to trick, deceive. And so Jacob tricks his brother, and he doesn't deal with the problem, and he runs from it. And you know what he ends up running into? More deception. And so in your life, if you don't deal with your family dysfunction, you are going to end up marrying into some dysfunction. You're going to end up dating into dysfunction. Like if you don't deal with the alcohol problem in your family, you are going to end up. Like if you don't deal with the pornography problem in your family, you're going to end up tied to it. And so you're thinking, no, it's not a big deal. I come from a pretty good family. I go to a Christian school. But I'm here to tell you that there is dysfunction in your family, whether you want to admit it or not. And you need to deal with it. Because this can become a generational thing for you. And so what ends up happening is Jacob runs, and then he ends up marrying into deception. So in Genesis chapter 29, this is what the Word of God says in verse 21. It says, then Jacob said to Laban, let me give you a little bit of backstory. Jacob runs, and he meets this man named Laban who has 2 daughters. And he says, Jacob, I want you to work for me for 7 years, and I will give you my daughter. Right? He has Leela and Rachel, and Rachel is the younger daughter, and so Jacob wants Rachel because she looks good. So what ends up happening is, this is what it says. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, my time is complete, and I want you to make love to her. And I want to make love to her. So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, what is it you have done to me? I have served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me? And so Jacob runs from the dysfunction, he runs from the division, and he ends up marrying into more deception. And so he works for Laban for 7 years. He was supposed to marry Rachel. Laban tricks him and gives him his other daughter. And so now Jacob is upset, and he's asking Laban, why have you deceived me? And so he married into more dysfunction in the family. And then what ends up happening is he tells him, well, I want you to serve me another 7 years, and then you can have Rachel. Well, that already sounds like a problem, because nobody in here would want 2 wives or 2 husbands. It never is going to end well, you know. And so he has these 2 daughters that he ends up working for, and he's married to them both. And so what ends up happening is the deception, my last point of this, the deception leads to destruction. So Jacob's family dysfunction and favoritism, right? He starts to have kids, and he has multiple kids, right? That's 12 kids. And he has Joseph through Rachel and these other kids through other women, right? He treats Joseph better than he treats the others because Rachel was the woman he really wanted to be with. And so then the brothers begin to resent Joseph and hate Joseph. So this started with Isaac and Ishmael hating each other as siblings. and dysfunction in the family. Then it went to Isaac's family and happened between Esau and Jacob. And now it's happening between Jacob and his children. And so this is 4 generations now where siblings have grown up hating each other and not liking each other because of dysfunction and disobedience that was never dealt with. And so the deception leads to destruction. What happens? Well, we all know the story of Joseph. His brothers take him and they wanted to plot to kill him, but instead of killing him, they end up selling him into slavery, and he ends up in slavery in Egypt. And so then Joseph ends up moving his way up in Egypt. He becomes higher up, and then his family ends up coming there because of a famine, and Joseph ends up saving his family. And so my last point is this: God offers deliverance. And so what I want to tell you is, God is not delayed or deferred or deterred or destroyed by our family dysfunction, right? God is still on the throne. God is still who He is, but He doesn't want dysfunction in our families, right? He doesn't want our families to be dysfunctional. He doesn't want there to be disobedience in our family. But since we're human, there will be disobedience, but if we don't deal with it, it can create a generational curse or a family tie. And so God does offer deliverance. And in Genesis chapter 50, this is how it all ends. This is what the Word of God says. This is what Joseph says. In Genesis chapter 50, verse 19, it says, "But Joseph said to them, 'Don't be afraid. I am in the place of God. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives.'" And so God offers us deliverance. Like maybe your family has been dysfunctional for years. Like, maybe alcohol has been a problem in your family for years, but it doesn't have to be your problem. Pornography may be a problem in your family, or lust, for years. Like 8 out of 10 teens typically look at pornography on a daily basis. But we don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. But it doesn't have to be your problem. Divorce may be a common theme in your family, but it doesn't have to be a common theme for you. Like, abuse may be a common like, I know you're thinking, no, man, we go to a Christian school, no way. But the truth is, we're all human and we all have problems. And I need you to know that God offers you deliverance, but you have to cut family ties. So it looks like, I want to show you visually. So let me get 5 of y'all to come up here, right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Y'all come on stage real quick. Don't be afraid. Here we go. And I want to show y'all what it looks like. Here, I want you to take this bag, and you're going to pull that string out, and then just grab that little black thing, all right? You can go over there to that side, you can go to that side. Same thing, you'll be in the middle. Here we go, I'm almost done, guys. Here we go, pull that string out. And so what ends up happening in this story, right? Since he's ready, we'll go to him first. Abraham's disobedience happens. Go ahead and clip that to my belt loop right there. Right? And hold on to that string, all right? Abraham's disobedience happens, and he never deals with it, so he's tied to it, right? And since he never deals with it, it stays with his family. And he can go and you can live life and see, I can do anything I want to do. Like I could play the guitar, I could play baseball, golf, whatever it is. It's not really affecting my life right now, but I can only go as far as my disobedience will allow me. So then what happens is the disobedience never gets dealt with, so then the dysfunction comes. Go ahead and clip me, wherever you want. Yep, that's cool. Here, I got you. So then the dysfunction happens. And the dysfunction's never dealt with, right? Because we don't want to deal with family dysfunction. We don't want to admit our family has problems. And so I can go places, but I can go only as far as it lets me. And so you're in a series where you're talking about your relationship with God. God, I'm about to go all in for you. Only as far as your family dysfunction will let you, because you don't want to really deal with it. Like, no, pornography is not a problem for us. Only as far until you really deal with it. So then the division comes, and now you start to hate all your family. I hate them. You don't understand, G, I will never forgive my dad. He touched me when I was little. Like, we don't want to act like stuff like that really happens. And I'll never forgive him. I hate him. I hate my mom for leaving us. I hate both my parents for getting a divorce. I'll never love my step-sibling. and the division happens. So then, after the division comes the deception, right? So now we become where we like to deceive people, and we like to lie. And we'll only go as far as we're tied to. And then lastly, we get tied to the destruction. Families get destroyed left and right. We wonder why divorce rate, even in the Christian family, is at 50%. Because we don't want to deal with the things that we're tied to. But the truth is, God offers deliverance. But what does it take? It takes looking at it and admitting it. You want to really start to work on your relationship with God, your relationship with other people, you have to deal with the relationships. You have to deal with the disobedience. You have to deal with the dysfunction. You have to deal with the division and the deception and the destruction, or it's going to leave you broken. And we wonder why hurt people hurt people. Because we never deal with the problem, which is our heart. We're broken and we feel defeated. And it will start a generational curse, because what you don't deal with now, your kids and your kids' kids will. Don't believe me? Go check David out and then check his son Solomon out in the Bible. David had Bathsheba, lust at a singular level. Solomon had hundreds of wives because his dad never taught him how to deal with it. And the problem is we don't deal with the problems of our life. And so God's saying to you today that He wants to set you free. How? Because Jesus offers us freedom. When you come to know Christ, you are a new creation. So you're not held to the past. You're not held on to what you were tied to. And God will set you free. And He will break generational curses that you dealt with in your life. He'll take the chains and break them. Whatever your parents were dealing with, you no longer have to deal with. What your great-grandparents had to deal with, you won't have to deal with. And don't worry, people won't like it. Like, people will say, your daddy wasn't nothing, so you won't be nothing. Your great-granddaddy wasn't nothing, so you won't be nothing. Like, that's the type of stuff they'll say to you because they hate that you're breaking a generational curse. Y'all can be seated. Y'all can just set that down. Thank y'all. And so the choice is yours today. Like, when you go home today, like, is your family all right? Like, maybe you need to be the catalyst that changes your family. Like, maybe you have a burden on your family that you need to deal with. The choice is going to be yours. I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to let Mr. Jason come up and finish, all right?